I don't know why I'm writing this down. Maybe because saying it out loud feels worse. Maybe because if I write it, I can convince myself it was nothing. Just a bad night, an overactive imagination. The kind of thing that dissolves in daylight and feels embarrassing by afternoon. I've told myself that every morning for 3 weeks. I drive home, shower, make coffee, sit at my kitchen table in the early light and think, see, it's fine, you're fine, it was nothing. And then 10 o'clock comes around and I have to go back. I work data entry at a mid-sized logistics company. 12 floors, glass and concrete. The kind of building that looks like every other building on the street. Identical lobby, identical signage, the same corporate carpet in shades of gray that someone chose specifically to prevent anyone from feeling anything. I took the night shift because it paid $4 more an hour, and I needed the $4. I still need them. That's the part that doesn't change. The deal was simple. Come in at 10, leave at 6, process the overnight intake files. Don't bother anyone. Most nights it was just me on the 8th floor and a security guard named Dennis who did his rounds on the hour, signed his clipboard, and spent the rest of the night asleep in the lobby with the television on low. For the first 2 months, nothing happened. I want to be clear about that. 2 full months of completely uneventful nights, long and quiet, and honestly a little tedious in a way I found almost meditative once I got used to it. The worst thing that happened in those 2 months was the vending machine on 8 swallowed my dollar and gave me nothing. I filed a complaint with the building manager. That's the register of problems I was dealing with. I had a routine. I knew every sound the building made. The HVAC system cutting on at midnight with a low pressurized hum that you felt more than heard. The elevator settling into its shaft sometime around 2 with a deep mechanical thunk. The pipe somewhere below 6 that knocked 3 times in quick succession whenever the temperature outside dropped. I cataloged all of it, the way you do when you spend enough hours alone in a quiet place. Your brain starts filing things automatically. This sound means this, that sound means that. Nothing to worry about. Go back to your screen. That's how I know what started happening 3 weeks ago was different. It began with the lights on the floor above me. 9 was empty. Had been for 6 months since the consulting firm that leased it relocated downtown and took everything with them. Furniture, equipment, personnel, all of it gone in a single weekend. I'd been up there once during my first week, just out of curiosity, just to orient myself to the building. It was a gutted floor, bare carpet, exposed ceiling grid, fluorescent tubes that were supposed to be switched off at the breaker. It smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee, and that particular stale quality that rooms develop when they stop being used. A held breath smell, like something waiting. I didn't stay more than a few minutes, but one Tuesday night, maybe around 1 in the morning, maybe a little after, I was walking back from the bathroom and I noticed a faint glow coming through the gap at the bottom of the stairwell door. Thin and pale. Just enough to be visible in the dark hallway. The kind of glow that fluorescent lights make when they're on but not fully warmed up. I told myself it was emergency lighting. Building code requires it, and I'd never actually paid attention to what the emergency strips on 9 looked like at night. It could have been. It was a plausible explanation, and I accepted it and went back to my desk. The next night, I checked when I walked past. It was brighter. Not dramatically. I'm not trying to make this into something cinematic. It wasn't a horror movie moment. It was just a strip of light under a door that was slightly more noticeable than it had been the night before, enough that I stopped and looked at it for a moment and felt something I didn't have a name for yet. I texted Dennis. He said he'd check it out. 20 minutes passed, and then he texted back, "All good up there, lights are off." I thanked him. I sat back down at my desk and looked across the office at the stairwell door and watched the faint glow pulse almost imperceptibly, the way fluorescents do when there's a fault in the ballast. Dennis had said the lights were off. I didn't text him again. I told myself he'd looked quickly and hadn't noticed. I told myself I was tired. I put my headphones in and finished my shift. The sound started about a week later. Again, I want to be precise, because imprecision is how these things get dismissed, and I'm tired of dismissing it. I'm not talking about dramatic, unmistakable footsteps. I'm talking about something subtler and in some ways worse, the quality of the silence changing. The way you can tell, even with your eyes closed, even with music playing softly, that a space that was empty is no longer empty. Something had shifted in the building. I heard it through the ceiling above me, which is the underside of the 9th floor, and it came in irregular intervals. Once around midnight, twice in the span of 10 minutes, closer to 3. Once just before 4 that made me stop typing and sit very still for almost a minute. Not rhythmic, not mechanical, not the HVAC, which I knew by then like a piece of music I'd memorized. This was something repositioning, something that paused. I started keeping my headphones in, not to listen to anything, but because the wire gave me something to do with my hands. Then came the night I heard it in the stairwell. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom, which meant walking the length of the office and passing the stairwell door. I was maybe 4 feet from it when I stopped, because there was a sound on the other side that I couldn't immediately categorize. Not footsteps, not the elevator, which was on the other side of the building. Nothing I could point to and name. The closest I've come to describing it in the 3 weeks since is this. It was the sound of weight being transferred. Slowly, deliberately. As if something on the stairs above me was shifting from one position to another, not going anywhere, not coming down, just adjusting, just making itself more comfortable in the dark. I stood at that door for a long time. Long enough that the sound stopped, or long enough that I stopped being able to separate it from my own pulse, which had gotten loud. I went to the bathroom. I washed my hands twice. When I came out and walked back past the stairwell, it was quiet, and I went to my desk and sat down and made a decision, without fully articulating it to myself, not to tell Dennis. I'm still not entirely sure why. Partly because I'd already texted him about the lights and didn't want to be the person who called about every little thing. Partly because I couldn't figure out how to describe what I'd heard without it sounding like nothing. I heard a sound in the stairwell, Dennis. And have him go up, find nothing, and look at me the way people look at you when they've decided you're the problem. But partly, and this is the part I keep returning to, because I was afraid he'd go up there and find it empty, and come back down and tell me everything was fine. Because if everything was fine, and I was still hearing things, still seeing light under doors that he'd told me had no light, then the explanation shifts. And I didn't want the explanation to shift. I need this job. I need the $4 an hour, and I need the health insurance that kicks in at 6 months, and I'm at 5.5. That's what I mean when I say I can't leave. It's not dramatic. It's just arithmetic. So I come back every night at 10 and I badge in, and I ride the elevator to 8, and I sit down and I do the work. And I've started positioning my desk so my back is to the wall. Last night, this is the part I've written and deleted 4 times now. I was at my desk at around 4 in the morning. Headphones in, nothing playing, just the wire and the habit. I was looking at my screen and something made me glance toward the windows. Floor-to-ceiling glass, 8th floor, facing the street. In the reflection, dark and slightly distorted, the way glass reflections always are, I could see the office behind me laid out in reverse. The empty desks, the dark hallway, the stairwell door at the far end. The stairwell door was open. I turned around immediately, in one motion, fast enough that my chair rolled back and hit the desk behind me. The door was closed. It is always closed. The mechanism pulls it shut on its own. I've watched it happen 100 times. You walk through and it swings back and latches. That's how it works. I turned back to the window. In the reflection, it was open. I sat there for a long time, looking back and forth between the room and its mirror. Closed. Open. Closed. Open. The same room. 2 different rooms. I've been thinking about that since, about reflections, about whether glass can be trusted to show you what's actually there, or whether it has its own version of events, about what it means that the same space, at the same moment, can contain 2 contradictory things depending on which one you're looking at directly. I don't have an answer. I go back tonight at 10. I don't know what else to do. I've been camping alone for 11 years. I want to say that first, before anything else, because I know how this is going to sound, and I need you to understand that I am not the kind of person who spooks easily in the woods. I know what a fox sounds like at night. I know the difference between a branch falling under its own weight and a branch being moved. I know how to read an environment, how to sit inside it and let it settle around you until you stop being a disturbance in it and start being a part of it. I've done solo trips in the Cascades, the Adirondacks, once a brutal 2-week stretch in the Boundary Waters, where I didn't see another person for 9 days. I've camped in places that would make most people deeply uncomfortable, and I have never, not once, packed up early and left. I left this one on the 2nd morning, drove 4 hours home without stopping. I've been sitting with what happened for 6 weeks now, and this is the first time I've been able to write it out in full, and I'm still not sure I can explain it. I'm not sure explaining it is even the right goal. Some things resist explanation. What I can do is describe it as carefully and honestly as I can, and let you make of it what you will. I drove out to a stretch of national forest about 200 miles from home. I'm not going to be more specific than that, and I think you'll understand why by the end. I'd found the spot the previous spring on a map, a small lake maybe 3 miles off the nearest trailhead, accessible via an unmaintained fire road that my truck could just about manage. I'd noted it and thought about it for months. A lake that size, that far-off trail in mid-October. I was almost guaranteed solitude. That was the point. I needed a week of nothing. No signal, no obligations, no noise but my own. I pulled in on a Sunday afternoon with enough daylight left to make camp properly. The site I chose was at the northern edge of the lake, just inside the tree line, with a clear sight line across the water and a good flat area for the tent. I set up methodically, the way I always do. Tent first, then tarp, then kitchen area, then fire ring. By the time I'd gathered wood and eaten dinner, it was fully dark, and the lake was doing that thing where it goes perfectly still and reflects everything above it like a second sky. I sat by the fire for a while and felt, for the first time in months, genuinely relaxed. The first thing I noticed was the birds, or rather, the absence of them. I'd been aware, without consciously registering it, that the woods around me had been quiet when I arrived. Arrival always disrupts things. Animals hear you coming, hear the truck, go still, and wait you out. That's normal. What's not normal is for a forest to still be that quiet 4 hours later, after dark has fallen, and you've been sitting motionless by a low fire for the better part of 2 hours. By that point, the woods should have resumed. Owls, nightjars, the small rustling movements of nocturnal animals going about their business. Instead, there was just quiet, the kind that has weight to it. I noticed it, filed it under odd, and went to bed. The next morning, it was still there. I woke at 6 to the kind of pale gray light that comes just before the sun clears the tree line, made coffee, sat outside the tent, and listened. Nothing. No birdsong at all, which in October woods is strange enough to be memorable. A chickadee somewhere, distantly, once. That was all. The lake was flat and colorless in the early light. The trees on the far bank were perfectly still. I remember thinking that the place had the quality of a photograph. Everything slightly too static, slightly too posed. I shook it off. I hiked that morning, 6 miles out and back on a ridge above the lake, and I was fine. The woods up there felt more normal. I heard a woodpecker, spooked a grouse, came across fresh deer sign on a muddy stretch of trail. Whatever odd quality the camp had, it didn't extend everywhere. I came back in the early afternoon feeling better. That evening was when things shifted. I was cooking dinner when I became aware of being watched. I felt that before. Most people who spend time in the backcountry have. You're usually right, and it's usually a deer on the other side of a bush or a hawk on a branch overhead. This felt different in a way I couldn't have articulated cleanly in the moment. It didn't feel like animal attention, which has a kind of flat, neutral quality. Animals watch you to assess whether you're a threat. This felt more considered, more sustained. I looked up from my food and scanned the tree line across the fire from me, maybe 30 feet away, and found nothing. No eye shine, no shape that didn't belong, just trees going back into darkness. I ate my dinner and told myself I was tired, but I kept looking up. That's the thing I remember most clearly about that evening. The involuntary way my eyes kept going back to the same spot in the tree line, slightly left of a white birch that stood out against the darker pines behind it. Not because I saw anything there, because something kept pulling my attention to it in the way that your eyes find a sound source, even in the dark, even when there's nothing to see. Some part of my brain had decided that was the direction and kept checking. I built the fire up higher than I needed to and went to bed earlier than I planned. At some point in the night, I didn't check my watch, but it felt like the deep middle of it, 2 or 3 in the morning. I woke up and lay still for a moment, the way you do when you wake suddenly outdoors and spend a second reorienting, And in that second of quiet, I realized there was a sound just outside the tent that I didn't have a category for. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't snuffling or breathing or any of the sounds that something with a body makes when it's nearby. It was more like a pressure, like the sound equivalent of something very large being very close and very still. I lay there and did not move. I've been charged by a moose, and I stayed calmer than I did in that tent. I lay on my back and stared at the fabric ceiling and listened and waited for the sound to resolve into something I could name. It never did. After a while, 10 minutes, maybe 15, it simply wasn't there anymore. The absence arrived the same way the presence had, quietly and without drama, and I was left alone with the sound of the lake and my own breathing. I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I walked the perimeter of my camp, looking for tracks. I don't know exactly what I was hoping to find. A bear print, a wolf, anything that would give the night a clean and rational shape. The ground around the tent was soft enough in places to hold an impression. I found nothing. Not a partial, not a smear. Nothing. It was while I was doing this that I noticed the stones. On the far side of the fire ring from my tent, someone had arranged a line of 5 stones on the ground. Flat ones, roughly palm-sized, set in a row with a few inches of space between each. They were not there the night before. I am certain of this because I'd cleared that area myself when I set up camp, moving debris away from the fire perimeter. Those stones had not been in that line when I cleared the ground. They were there now. I stood there and looked at them for a long time. The woods around me were quiet. The lake behind me was quiet. The rational explanation that I'd missed them, that they'd been there all along, that I'd placed them in some half-asleep state and forgotten. Each of those felt like a piece of clothing that didn't quite fit. I tried them on and put them down and stood there in the cold morning air, looking at 5 flat stones on the ground. I tried one more time to find a rational frame. Wind doesn't arrange stones. Animals don't arrange stones. A person would explain the footprints. The absence of footprints would not explain the stones. I sat with that loop for a while, following it around, and then I stopped following it and started breaking camp. I was packed and driving out by 9:30. The fire road was empty, as it had been when I'd arrived. I drove slowly over the rough sections and thought about nothing in particular, which was the only way I could get myself to keep driving at a reasonable speed, rather than just pointing the truck downhill and flooring it. When I hit the paved road, I stopped and sat for a moment with the engine running. The thing that has stayed with me, the thing that keeps me up, if I'm being honest, is not the sound outside the tent. It's not even the stones. It's this. When I drove in on Sunday, I'd had to get out of the truck 3 times to move fallen branches off the fire road. I remember it because it was tedious and it took time. I was in a hurry to get to the site and the branches were in the way. When I drove out Monday morning, the road was clear. Every single branch was gone. I didn't move them. I was in the tent all night. I haven't been back. I've looked at the map a dozen times, at that little blue shape that marks the lake, and I've thought about what was there before I arrived and what was there when I left. And I've thought about the gap between those 2 things, and I still don't know what to put in it. I don't think I'm going to go back and find out. moved into the apartment in February, which is the worst possible time to form impressions of a place. Everything is gray and closed off, and people don't linger in hallways or hold doors open because it's cold, and everyone is moving quickly from one warm space to another. So in those first few weeks, I didn't think much about my neighbors at all. I knew there was a woman on my left with a small dog that scratched at the baseboard sometimes. I knew the couple above me argued on weekends. The man on my right I barely registered, except as a closed door with a mat in front of it that said nothing. No name, no pattern, just a rectangle of dark rubber that someone had placed there functionally and without sentiment. His name is Gerald. I know that from the mailboxes in the lobby. G. Maurer, Unit 4B. I've lived beside him for 8 months, and I have spoken to him exactly twice. Once when I locked myself out and used his phone. Once when I knocked to tell him his television was very loud at what I thought was an unusual hour. Both times the interaction lasted less than 90 seconds. Both times he looked at me with an expression that I've spent a lot of time trying to interpret and still can't quite pin down. Not unfriendly, exactly. Not hostile. More like someone running a calculation, like he was standing behind his own eyes doing math. I tell myself I'm not a suspicious person. I tell myself I'm private, and I appreciate privacy in others, and that there's nothing wrong with a man keeping to himself. I've told myself that probably 200 times in the last 3 months, which is itself a kind of answer. The first thing I noticed was the hours. Gerald comes and goes at strange times. Not just late. I've had neighbors who worked nights, who came home at 2 in the morning, and that's normal. You adjust to it. This is different. Gerald doesn't seem to have a schedule at all. I've heard his door at 4 in the afternoon, at 11 at night, at 5:30 in the morning. I've heard him leave and return within 20 minutes. I've gone entire weekends without hearing his door once, and then heard it 3 times in a single night. There's no pattern to it. Patterns are comforting. The absence of pattern is something else. I started noticing because the walls in this building are thin, and his door, both our doors, open into the same small alcove off the main hallway. The sound carries clearly. I wasn't listening for it. I just became aware of it the way you become aware of any recurring sound once you've noticed it once. The second thing was the smell. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds, and I'm aware that smells from neighboring apartments are usually mundane and usually explained by cooking and cleaning products and personal habits that are nobody's business. I've smelled garlic from 4A and cigarette smoke from 4C, and that's fine. What started coming from Gerald's apartment around week 6 of my living here was something I couldn't put in any of those categories. It came through the shared wall in the kitchen, usually in the evenings, usually for 20 or 30 minutes, and then gone. Not a food smell, not chemical, not sewage, nothing that activated alarm the way those smells do. The closest I can get is organic, mineral, the smell of something very old, or something that had been in a closed space for a very long time. I don't have better language than that. I've tried. I mentioned it to the woman on my left, Elena, who has lived in the building for 4 years. She made a face I couldn't read and said she'd noticed it too, sometimes, and then changed the subject. I thought about following up. I didn't. The third thing was the sounds. Not the television. The television is just television. Too loud, usually on at strange hours, which is its own minor footnote. I'm talking about something else, something that started maybe 6 weeks ago and has happened, by my count, 9 times since. It happens late, never before midnight, and it's this: a sound of movement from his apartment that doesn't match the sound of a person moving through a space. I've lived beside other people my whole life. I know the ambient grammar of a person in an apartment, footsteps in a particular rhythm, the specific sound of furniture being navigated around, the small domestic clatter of someone making tea at midnight or walking to the bathroom. This isn't any of that. It's slower, more deliberate. And it comes from parts of the apartment that correspond to his far wall and the area near his windows, which is to say, away from where anyone would have any reason to be moving at that hour. Once, just once, there was a sound I still don't have a word for. Not a voice, not quite, not music. Something between those things that lasted for about 40 seconds and then stopped. I sat on my couch and waited for it to come again, and it didn't. I want to be honest about what happened next because it reflects poorly on me, and I think honesty is important here. I started paying attention in a way that I'm not proud of. I started noting the times his door opened and closed in the Notes app on my phone, in a small log that I told myself was just to see if there was a pattern. There wasn't. I started looking out my peephole when I heard his door, sometimes, not always. I told myself I was just curious. I know that's not quite right. What I saw in those small fisheye glimpses of the hallway, Gerald leaving with no bag, no coat, regardless of the weather. Gerald returning carrying nothing visible. Gerald standing once just outside his door for nearly 4 minutes without moving, as though he'd forgotten where he was going or had just remembered something and was deciding what to do about it. He stood with his back to me and his hand on the door frame, and he was perfectly still in a way that people aren't usually perfectly still, and then he went inside. The thing I keep coming back to is the light. His windows face the same direction as my windows. There's an air shaft between us, but it's narrow, and when I'm in my kitchen, I can see his living room windows if I lean slightly to the left. I don't usually look, but several weeks ago I was doing dishes late, and I noticed his lights were on, which they often are at odd hours, and I glanced over and the lights were off by the time my eyes found the window. Which is fine. People turn their lights off. Except that there was no transition, no dimming, no switch flip timing. In the peripheral version, they were on. In the direct version, they were off. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like a brain doing something that brains sometimes do, filling in or misremembering. And I held on to that explanation for a while because it's a good one. But then it happened again, and again, 3 times now. Always the same, lights visible in the corner of my vision, gone when I looked directly. Every time I've checked directly after, leaned to the left, looked across the shaft, looked at dead, dark windows. Every time. Last week, something happened that I haven't been able to set down since. I was in the hallway on my way out, 7 in the morning, keys in hand. Gerald's door opened and he stepped out. We were face to face, closer than we'd been since the night I borrowed his phone. He was dressed, which I mention only because it was 7 in the morning after a night during which I'd heard his door at 11, at 1:40, and at 4:15. He looked the way he always looks. Contained, neutral, wearing that expression I can't read. He nodded at me. I nodded back. I said good morning. He said good morning. And then, as I was turning toward the elevator, he said my name. Not my last name, my first name, which I have never told him. It is not on my mailbox. It is not on my door. I moved here in February, knowing no one in the building, and I have been, if I'm honest, deliberate about my privacy in ways that make it very difficult to explain how Gerald Maurer knows what to call me. I turned around. He was already going back inside, his door closed. I stood in the hallway for a moment, and then I got in the elevator and went to work and thought about it for the entire day and came up with nothing. I've thought about it every day since. I've gone through every possible explanation, a mutual connection, the building manager, something I signed that I've forgotten, some interaction so small I didn't register it, and I've found no bottom to it, no point at which the explanation satisfies. I'm still in the apartment. I'm aware of how it looks that I'm still here, that someone who was genuinely concerned would have done something more concrete by now, made a report, spoken to the building manager, moved. Maybe. But what do I report exactly? Wrong hours, strange smells, lights that behave oddly in my peripheral vision. A man who knows my name. None of it is enough. All of it is too much. His door opened 20 minutes ago, which is why I'm writing this at 2 in the morning. He hasn't come back yet. I can see the hallway from my peephole if I stand at my door, which I have been doing off and on for the last 20 minutes. The mat is still there. G. Maurer. That dark rectangle, placed without sentiment. I'm going to go to bed now. I'm going to stop checking the peephole. I'll try again tomorrow.